Hi, it's Penny here. So this video is going to be my quarterly reading review. So we're going to look at the books that I read in April, May, and June. I'm going to talk about the best books that I read, the worst books that I read, and also just check in on my reading goals to keep myself accountable. So let's start with the best books. I'm going to start with my favorite physical book. And normally this is when I have a mini breakdown about the fact that I was using physical book to also mean books that I read digitally, and then I was like, but I can't use the word textbook because that's a different concept. But I have solved the problem because I'm going to tell you my favorite physical book as well as my favorite ebook separately, and then I get to talk about more great books. So I solved my problem and it's got benefits. So my favorite physical book that I read in Q2 is The Outside by Ada Hoffman. So this is a sci-fi book, and in this world there are AI gods, and the idea is that when you die, these AI gods will absorb your soul, and so it's in the best interest of the AI gods for humans to be doing really great things so that they can then absorb that person who did the great things. But also, of course, they want to keep humans under control and not let them get too out of hand. And at the start of this book, there is a science experiment kind of with experimenting with this new kind of power reactor, and it doesn't go as expected, and the gods have to send in the angels to kind of deal with the situation. I especially loved the little bits at the beginning of each chapter. So at the beginning of each chapter, you get a little excerpt, which is either from the scientist's journal or little bits of religious text. And the way that it talks about these AI gods, so it's technology, but it's being talked about in a religious way. And I love that. I will admit that I maybe wish the plot had gotten a little bit weirder, but actually most of the book is more about the world building and then the characters kind of their journey through this strange world. Because I should also mention the main character in this is autistic, and I really liked that representation as well. And I think there's a lot in here about how civilization has improved the way they support neurodivergent people. So I really love this, and I'm actually reading the second book in this. This is a trilogy. I'm reading the second book in this series at the moment, and maybe not loving it quite as much, but still really enjoying it. Then my favorite ebook was The Reindeer People by Megan Lindholm. I have this book from the library, but I did actually read it via ebook. So Megan Lindholm, if you don't know, is a pen name for Robin Hobb, and this feels very Robin Hobb in the way that it's so focused on the characters and their emotions. Primarily, we're following this young woman who has a son who, again, is somewhat neurodivergent. You're never quite clear exactly, but she's definitely really struggling with trying to raise him. And whenever they're around other people, they're not generally very accepting of his differences. So right at the beginning, she takes her son away from the group of people they have been living with and goes off, they think, to be by themselves, but they do eventually come across these reindeer people. So this tribe of people that herd reindeer, and there's a lot of interactions between her and the reindeer people. To be honest, I spent a large amount of this book just saying, oh no, because things would happen and I could just see how terribly it was going to go, or people would misunderstand things in a way that you would be like, that's so wrong. But it wasn't miscommunication, as people always like to write things off of. It was just the truth that sometimes people misinterpret situations. And really, all I want from this is for all these characters to get happy endings, except for the couple of men that I really hate. Robin Hobb also really great at writing despicable men that you really want to suffer. So I'm actually currently in the middle of the sequel of this as well. This is just a duology. And honestly, I just want happy endings for everyone except one guy. I'm willing to give the other guy a redemption arc if that's the direction she decides to go in. But if he suffers, that's also fine. Then the best audiobook that I read in Q2 is Age of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan. To be honest, I read the first book and the third book in this series physically. I have the third book here. And I actually think I read some of the second book physically as well. And also, I think I prefer, when I say physically, I actually mean via ebook. Words, meanings, whatever. Still, even though I prefer the reading experience with reading with my eyes, I do think the audiobooks are really well done. And I probably could still read these via audiobook and enjoy them that way. I just think I enjoy them even more, like to the next level, when I read them with my eyes. But Age of Swords still comes out as the best audiobook I read in the quarter, which maybe doesn't say much for the rest of the audiobooks I read. There were still some other candidates. Anyway, Age of Swords is the second book in a 6-book series called Legends of the First Empire. I'm slowly learning that name. This is a world where humans are kind of still somewhat developing. Like, they don't have a lot of technology, and they view the elves of this world, who they call the Frey, they view them as like gods. They think they're immortal, they think they can't die. However, right at the beginning of the first book, a human kills a Frey and they think, they're not gods. There's also at the same time some amount of like elven politics going on, which leads to a war between the humans and the elves. There are also some dwarves around and like some dragony type things, and the fantasy is good in this series. This is a very solid fantasy series as well. Michael J. Sullivan has like a really great tone to his writing. It's kind of a nice balance between humor and seriousness. There's some parts of the series which just have really great emotional gut punches. And like every single part of this series, or like every single part of the books, is important to the story. Well, maybe I could have done with a little bit less romance, but actually I think those romances are important to the plot eventually. But just the way that these books are written, they tend to come together in such satisfying ways in the end. And I'm actually really glad that this isn't a 3-book series, like a trilogy, because the third book, even though I really liked it and I did find the ending satisfying, there's still a lot that I want to know about in this world. And so I'm glad there's not just this series, but he's written multiple series in this world. So there's a lot to unpack, and I'm looking forward to unpacking it. Then in terms of favorite graphic novel, to be honest, last year I read so many graphic novels that graphic reading was such a big part of my reading, and that's why I put it in these quarterly reviews in the first place, because I kind of just started doing them last year. But I've been reading very few graphic novels this year. So the best one I really have for Q2 is The Cursed Princess Club Volume 2, which was a reread for me. And normally I wouldn't really put rereads on this list, but I don't really have anything else. And when do I not love talking about The Cursed Princess Club? So The Cursed Princess Club is a series where we have the 3 pastel princesses who are betrothed to the 3 plaid princes. Unfortunately, when they meet, the third prince is very distressed to discover that the third princess, Gwendolyn, like her 2 older sisters, are very classically beautiful fairy tale princesses, but Gwendolyn has green hair and is often misidentified as a witch. So he's like, oh my god, she's ugly, I don't want to marry her. And as a result, she kind of runs off into the forest where she meets the Cursed Princess Club, which is a bunch of princesses who have curses that they can't cure. Which all sounds very silly, and it is very humorous and fun, but also really wholesome, and something about the humor just feels really clever. And also the way that the plot comes together, a lot of things that seem very silly in the beginning actually turn out to be quite important. And so this really doesn't seem like the kind of thing I would love, but I love it so much. Anytime I'm feeling sad, I can pick up the Cursed Princess Club and feel happier. And the only thing that makes me sad is that my library only has the first 2 volumes. I might try and see if I can get them to buy more, but I also think at this point I love Cursed Princess Club enough that I'm going to try and buy my own copies. Oh, and because I do want everybody to read this, like even if you don't think you'll like it, I think you should try it. You can also read this for free on Webtoon. I just think that when I read it, you could just blast through the whole thing, but I think now you can only read a little bit each day for free. But still, something this high quality for free, great. But now, the opposite of great, let's talk about the most disappointing books from Q2. Firstly, most disappointing physical book honestly wasn't that disappointing, but The Martian Contingency by Mary Robinette Kowal. So this is the 4th, and I think it's probably going to be the final book in the Lady Astronaut series. So this is an alternate history where in the 50s a meteor hit the Earth and kind of set in motion events where the Earth is going to become uninhabitable. And so as a result, they've kind of escalated the space program. And the series primarily follows a bunch of like highly qualified women who are trying to be a part of the program and like really fighting against sexism. There's also a fair amount in here about other kinds of prejudice, like quite a lot about racism and a lot of other quite important and relevant themes as well. Like I really like the way this book series deals with different themes, even though perhaps you could say sometimes it is a little bit on the nose, a little bit too obvious. But honestly, these days I kind of think our world is such a mess that being obvious about these kind of things seems to be necessary. Anyway, the unfortunate thing with this one is that, so this one specifically, there's a bunch of people going to live on Mars, including our main character from the first book and her husband. And there's a lot in here about, well, a lot of space sex puns, a lot actually talking about sex. Like one of the plot points is about sex and pregnancy in space. And I didn't really like the way that some of that was dealt with. There's also a lot of detail in here about how to do certain religious events on Mars. And again, that level of detail wasn't that interesting to me, but I did really like the stuff in here about leadership, and there was actually an interesting mystery in here that really like focused around the racism plot that had kind of been worked on through the whole series. And I felt like the small part that it played in this book was a bit disappointing and almost like downplayed that theme to a degree I didn't appreciate. So this was still okay. But I think actually the third book in the series was much better, unfortunately. Then also, most disappointing ebook? No. Pretty much all the ebooks that I read in Q2 were great, so I don't have one. But most disappointing audio, I do want to mention Kingdom of the Gods by N.K. Jemisin. This one, I think maybe I actually started reading it physically because I do own this book, even though I hadn't necessarily liked, well, I kind of liked the first book in the series, the second one less so. The third one, by the time I picked it up, I didn't have high hopes for it, and so I pretty quickly swapped over to audio because I just didn't think otherwise that I would even get through this, even though I probably would have enjoyed it more if I'd read it physically, but I just didn't have the time, didn't have the motivation. So actually, I don't really know if this counts as like most disappointing because by the time I picked it up, I didn't really have high hopes anyway, so it kind of met expectations, just expectations were low. The series is set in a world where there are these three gods, except before the series, one of the gods killed the other one and then made the other one like a slave of the people that he put in charge, the humans that he put in charge, and basically said you can do whatever you want with the slave god as long as you worship me, of course. And the first two books are really kind of focused on those three gods. This one, though, follows more one of the children of the gods and his struggle to, I don't know, I didn't really care about him. I never liked him in the first two books, so a whole book about him was quite disappointing. And there was an element in this that I think could have been really cool, but it just kind of got lost in a bunch of unfocused other stuff. I have seen people say they really love this, so I guess if you really like more character-focused stories, maybe you could like this, but for me, I just didn't care. But actually, as I said, I don't think that fits most disappointing. So what I'm actually going to go with for most disappointing audiobook is Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth, even though this was also fine. And actually, I have to admit, I read this while I was sick, or I listened to the audiobook while I was sick, and maybe that played a part in me not loving it. Like maybe I just wasn't as mentally invested because I wasn't as mentally present. But also, I do have a lot of critiques about this, and I just think it didn't deliver what I had expected from the first chapter. So this was supposed to be Veronica Roth's first adult fantasy book, I think. In the first chapter, we're set up with these 5 chosen ones that in the past killed this dark one. And as a result of that, they're very traumatized. And the main character that we're following this is one of those 5 chosen ones. And the beginning, I really thought we were going to deal a lot with her trauma. And there was some of that, but just not enough for me to be satisfied with it. And I just didn't think that it really delved into that as fully as I was expecting or hoping. Instead, we got kind of this weird plot that also had like a multiverse kind of element to it, which is usually something I love, but the way that it delivered that was just, I don't know. I feel like it was delivered in such a jumbled way that it never managed to really like surprise you or like make you feel the emotions of it. Like, I think this could have been really cool. I just don't think it was. So disappointing. As well, actually, this was narrated by Dakota Fanning. And in the beginning, I thought she was doing it really well. But as it went on, I felt like her narration was just quite flat. And maybe that suited the character in the beginning, but as like things escalated in intensity, she still just was doing this really flat delivery that I just didn't think worked very well. So, disappointing. Then, for most disappointing graphic novel, I have to go with Witch Hat Atelier Volume 6 because this is where I DNF the series. And I actually wonder if Witch Hat is to blame for me getting out of the habit of reading graphic things, because for a while I kind of had it in my daily kind of routine. I would read a little bit of a graphic novel, and when I was reading ones that I really loved, I would always be like eager to do that. And then when I was reading Witch Hat Atelier, I kind of was like, well, maybe not today, maybe I'll do something else today, until I lost the habit. So Witch Hat Atelier, it's super cute. We have a bunch of cute little girls learning about this like drawing based magic, and each of them kind of has like different issues, as well as there being this bigger mystery about these what are they called? No brim witches or brimmed witches? I can't remember. I don't care enough, eventually, is what happened with this series. Maybe it's cute. I know a lot of people who read the series love the characters. I was just so bored. It goes so slowly. I couldn't bring myself to care. So, okay, so that's all my favorite and not favorite anti-favorites. Yeah, anti-favorites of the quarter. Now let's try and just quickly check in on my goals. So my first goal is about the number of books that I've read. My goal for 2025 is to read 50 audiobooks and 50 textbooks, 50 physical or ebooks. So at the end of Q2, I've read 35 audiobooks, so I'll definitely get to 50 by the end of the year, even though I've been reading slightly less audiobooks in the last month or so. But I still think I'll definitely read another 15 by the end of the year, right? And then for physical books and ebooks, so far I've read 36, so another 14. Again, I'll definitely hit that by the end of the year. We're looking good. I mean, I pretty much always set this number to be like easily achievable at my average reading level. I will also note I've only read 11 graphic things so far this year. And I think last year I was reading pretty much even graphic, audio, and text. So I'm trying to draw a pie chart with my hands. I think last year it was pretty even. So I think that definitely shows I'm reading less graphic novels this year. But I honestly, that's not a goal. We don't care. Then my second reading goal is to read good books, and I basically have like a distribution of star ratings that I'm aiming for. So my goal is less than 5%, 1 and 2 stars. I'm actually at 6% 2-star books, so 1% over, but I did DNF every single one of those. It's just that I rate DNFs, and some of those I read quite a lot of before I DNF'd. But anyway, 1% too many of those. It's pretty close. Then I wanted less than 25% 3 stars, and I'm actually at 26%. So again, 1% too many. And then my goal is 70% 4 and 5 stars, and I'm at 68%, so 2% less because I gave a percent extra to each of the others. But honestly, 1% either way, that's pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with my reading this year. And when I think back on it, I have been reading mostly good books, and I'm pretty happy with the books I'm choosing. Then my third goal was TBR Zero. So my aim is to have no books on my TBR shelf. Honestly, probably not. My real goal is to make it so that whenever I'm obtaining a book, I read it in the near future, which I'm actually doing pretty good at. I think pretty much every book that I've bought recently, I've read, except for the last 2 books in the Outside series, but like I'm actively in progress with that series. Oh, actually, I also have Infinity Gate and The Spear Cuts Through Water that I bought more recently, but they're around in TBR piles, so I forgot to add them to my list. But these I plan to read in the next month or 2, so I'm not worried about those. The ones that are a problem are the ones over here just out of shot. Big series, that I've had on my TBR for a long time. I'm working on it, but it's going to take time. And maybe I'm not mad about it. I think at the end of Q1, I had 17 books on my TBR, and I've written here that I read 5, and so that means, wow, that maths does not make sense, Penny. Ended with 17, none added, which is wrong, and then read 5, ended with 11. Oh, Penny, you can't do basic maths. That's really sad for you. I think maybe I only actually read 4 and bought 2. No, I must have read 6. Wait. I'm not going to try and do maths on camera. The summary is I'm pretty happy with the reading I'm doing. I would like to try and get to both The Grace of Kings and The Shadow of the Wind this year, as well as my newer book purchases. And if I don't get to some of the others for a bit longer, I guess whatever. It's more important to me that I'm prioritizing books I'm really excited about than getting to like full TBR Zero, as long as I'm always moving towards TBR Zero. I think so. Okay, then my next goal is Series Zero. Again, I'm not really aiming for 0, but I'm always wanting to be in a position where if I've started a series, I am either actively working to finish it or I'm waiting for the author to put out more books. And then it becomes kind of part of my new release process. So in Q2, I've written down that I have 8 series completions, but one of them's Witch Hat Atelier, which is cheating. Like, I completed the series by saying I'm not going to finish it or not going to continue it. Also, The Martian Contingency and Sunrise on the Reaping, and possibly even the Imperial Raj trilogy. I don't know if those series are like finished. I'm counting them as finished, but possibly the authors will write more in the respective worlds. I do also want to say I love Translation State. This is one of these ones where there's a character that's like completely unhuman, and I love those unhuman perspectives. So if you like that too, I do recommend this one. Then as well, I properly completed 4 series. So I finished the Rivalry of Revelations trilogy. I finished the Dreamblood duology. I finished the Inheritance trilogy, even though it wasn't my favorite. And I finished off The Shadow Histories by H.G. Parry. I think of the series that I completed, these were definitely my favorites, which conveniently I own both these books. So well done me. So I've been doing really well at completing series. And then I think in terms of series I have in progress, the series that I started in Q2, 2 of them, The Amber Owl, which is the first book in the Hearthstone series, trilogy. I wanted to say trilogy, but I don't actually know. And then The Will of the Many, which I've forgotten the name of that series. But again, both of those are just first book in the series. When new books come out, I will read them. Then I also started 3 other series, Legends of the First Empire, The Outside, and The Reindeer People. I'm actively working on all of those series, so I feel good about like any series I have in progress, I'm working on them. Okay, then my next reading goal is basically a bunch of lists of books that I'm wanting to get through. So firstly, we had the 2025 releases. I actually have a whole bunch more than this, my releases radar or my releases list, but for the goal, I'm just going to count the ones that I had put on the list at the start of the year. I think in Q1, I'd only read 1, but now I've read 7 on that list. Also, I think it's pretty unlikely at this point that we will get the next book in the Burning series, which started with Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. I don't think it's happening. And I actually also have doubts about the next book in the Adventures of Amina El-Sarafi because I haven't heard anything about that either. So if you take those 2 off, I'm also expecting next week to read The Devils and Isles of the Emberdark. So then other than that, there's just a few. I think probably the ones I won't get to this year will be the graphic novels. So the 3rd Night Eaters graphic novel and also the whatever volume 10 I think it's going to be of the Monstrous series. So both of those series are by Sana Takeda and Marjorie Liu, and I love the art, I love the stories. I'm definitely going to continue them. My library will definitely get Monstrous, but I just don't know if I'm going to be able to get Night Eaters from the library, and I don't know if that series is even like popular enough for them to be able to justify buying it if I requested it. But also I don't know if I love it enough to justify spending the money on it. So that's the only one that perhaps I won't get to. I'm pretty sure I'll get to the rest. Then I had my 5-star predictions list. And again, I think in Q1 I'd only read 1, but now I have read 5. And actually, at the start of July, which is technically Q3, I read another one. So I'm looking pretty good. I have a few more of them on my TBR for July. So I think I'll definitely get to all of these easy peasy. The only one, the very last one was going to be Maggie the Undying by Alona Andrews. That's not the name. They gave the book a new name. I think it's something like Your Kingdom Will Not Kill Me. Honestly, hate it. Maggie the Undying was way cooler, but it looks like now that's not coming out till 2026. So I won't get to that one, but the rest I should easily get to this year. Well, actually, I've just noticed right at the very top is The Shadow of the Wind and Grace of Kings. I really want to get to them, but I'm so scared of Grace of Kings because it's just a really long book and a really long series. But I'm sure I'm going to love it, so I just need to stop being a wussy. Then I also have my priority series list. There is some overlap between all these lists. So again, I think in Q1 I'd only read 2. Now I've completed another 2, as well as starting, 2 in Q2, but I've also started the Earthseed series at the start of July. So I think that means I'm more than halfway, which is good progress. I don't think I'll actually get to all of these series this year. I would love to, but I think I'm going to run out of time just because they're not just single books. I could start all these series this year, but because I'm always trying to finish series before I start new ones, that kind of throttles my speed a little bit. But if I don't get to them this year, I'll get to them start of next year. It'll be fine. Oh, and then I also had my list of rereads that I wanted to read. I've pretty much stalled on this because intentionally I decided to leave all my rereads to the end of the year because in terms of making end of year videos, it'll be a lot easier to make those knowing that I've only got rereads left and I'm not going to find a new surprise favorite that'll stop me from filming my favorites videos. We'll see how that actually works and see whether it's a good plan or whether it's just a procrastination strategy for this goal. We'll see. And then I think the last list is my want to read list on Goodreads. I actually haven't written down here. I think the goal was to get it under 50 books. Currently it's at 52. So end of Q1 it was 58. Should I test my maths here? I think I read 7 books off the list in Q2, but I added just one, which is Alien Earth by Megan Lindholm, some kind of sci-fi by Megan Lindholm, which is Robin Hobb, who I love. So that's the only book I added to this list. So I only need to read a couple more as long as I don't add any more, and then I'll have hit this goal. I'll definitely do it. I have a couple on my July TBR anyway, I think. But I don't want to get cocky because I had this goal last year and I got cocky and I ruined it at the end of the year. So I'm trying to keep working on reading books off this list and also not add books to this list unless I'm really super hyped to read them. Okay, then my last goals. Every year I do try to have some kind of goals around reading diversely. I did try to keep it pretty simple this year. My main goal is that I want to try and read one Maori authored book every month. So for Q2, I actually read 5 Maori authored books, although 3 of them were by one author. So 3 Maori authors, which meets the goal. Also, it has really been kind of not just diversifying my reading in terms of author perspective, but also this one is a historical fiction. And actually the other one, Legacy by Fiti Hiriaka, both of them had a historical fiction element. Legacy is more of a sci-fi time loop one, which is more my kind of thing, although it is YA, which is where I didn't love it as much. But this one is a historical fiction where we're following this young boy who, this young Maori boy in the mid 1800s in New Zealand, just kind of as New Zealand is being colonized. And he ends up basically going with this English artist over to London to be part of this exhibition. So the artist has been going all around New Zealand and drawing things and collecting things, and now he's doing this exhibition. And our main character kind of manipulates his way into going along because he has heard so much about London and he really wants to travel the world and learn as much as he can. And I really loved the first 2/3 of this book. I will say, I think it's very impressive that I found a historical fiction I can because I don't usually like historical fiction. However, the very last third, I think, let me down because it was kind of more typical historical fiction, where the first 2/3 was very New Zealand focused. The last third felt like it could have been any historical fiction. Got a bit tragic for me. I just was a bit bored with it, but I loved like the descriptions and the exploration of themes and just this young boy's journey and like thirst for knowledge in the first 2/3. Loved it. So even though this isn't normally the kind of book I would pick up, I'm very glad that I did. The 3 I read by the same author was 3 Audible exclusive or Audible originals by JP Pomare. These are all really short, like about 4 or 5 hour audiobooks. So they don't really have that much substance to them. I do often like JP Pomare's thrillers. I've read a lot of his works now. I've realized there's only one I haven't read, which I'm going to try and get to soon just so I can complete the set. But these weren't my favorite of his. I do think they're pretty solid thrillers, but they're just so short. Probably my favorite of these was Don't Look Back, where we have this kind of woman out in the middle of nowhere of New Zealand, kind of like in hiding because of events from her past. And then when she goes to the supermarket, there's this young boy choking on a piece of apple, and so she saves him or helps to save him, which unfortunately then goes viral and gives away her position to the people she was in hiding from, and everything kind of escalates from there. And you're learning a lot about her past as well as having these like more high intensity moments as she's on the run. So if you want a quick little thriller, I did enjoy this one. And like if you've got Audible, it's free in the Audible Plus library. So again, good stuff for free. We like it. The only other thing I was trying to do for diversity this year is I had a plan to basically get all of my TBR into my reading spreadsheet so that I could better track like whether the books I'm planning to read meet my diversity goals, whatever they are. I kind of wanted to come up with a better way of tracking some of that as well. And just that was my next reading goal, was to improve my reading spreadsheet and like have better reading stats. So last quarter, I did nothing for that. But Q2, I have put together an Excel reading spreadsheet. I do like some of the things I can do in Excel that I can't do in Google Sheets. I'm a bit sad because like I used to do a lot of spreadsheets at my job, but at home, I have a Mac, and Mac Excel is not as good as Windows Excel, and that does make me very sad. But I still think there are a decent amount of things I can do in it that I can't do on Google Sheets. There are a couple of things that Google Sheets does that Excel is harder to do in. So we'll see whether I do all this work to put it into Excel and then decide, no, I want to go back to Google Sheets. But at the moment, I think Excel is looking good. And it should mean I can put together certain things more easily. But we'll see. I've set it up, the basics pretty much the same as I used to have in Google Sheets, and now I'm working on improving it. And I do love spreadsheets and playing with spreadsheets, so that should be fun. So hopefully in my next quarterly update, I will have a cool, awesome spreadsheet. That's the goal. And then my only other reading goal was to do these quarterly updates and check in on my reading and make sure that I stay accountable. I think mostly I'm doing pretty good on my reading goals. There are a few books in those lists that I maybe won't get to, but maybe some of those lists were ambitious. Like maybe I was never going to get through all of those lists. I think I kind of knew that right at the beginning of the year. And I'm still making good progress. I'm still reading books that I'm mostly really loving. And I don't think there's really anything specifically that I want to change about my reading. I think we'll just see how Q3 goes. So let me know how your second quarter of reading went. Like what were your favorite books? What were your anti-favorites? And also if you have any reading goals, how are you doing with those? Let's chat down in the comments. Also do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.